My husband secretly removed my name from the house, so I made sure he lost everything. Ana Ramirez would never forget the strange feeling that coursed through her that day as she picked up the mysterious envelope left on the kitchen table. It was a cold November day, one of those when the city of São Paulo seemed shrouded in a heavy fog. She had just returned from the hospital, exhausted after visiting her father, who had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Each visit had torn a piece of her soul away. Ana had been struggling to balance caring for him, her career as an accountant, and the demands of a home that seemed to grow heavier on her shoulders. The house was silent, unusually empty, and that quiet seemed to foreshadow something ominous. Ana opened the envelope slowly, feeling a growing tightness in her chest with every movement. Inside were documents with cold words, announcing the abrupt end of her marriage. Divorce. A harsh, weighty word, printed in cold, impersonal letters. Her husband Michael's name gleamed at the end of the paper, signed and dated weeks before. Without warning, without conversation, without any consideration for the delicate moment they were living. Her mind whirled, trying to understand that absurd situation. Michael and she had built everything together over the past 10 years. He was an entrepreneur in the technology sector, while Ana managed the finances, always ensuring that everything was under control. They had 2 young children, Pedro and Luana, still in school, oblivious to the storm beginning to form. Ana felt her throat tighten, tears burning her eyes as she thought of the silent betrayal by the man she had chosen to spend her entire life with. Shock quickly mixed with fear. Ana didn't know what to do or think at that moment. She felt paralyzed, betrayed, humiliated. Michael had always been distant, but she had never imagined he could act in such an insensitive manner. She looked again at the document, and something in particular caught her attention. There were financial details that were strangely too generous. Michael was offering to assume all the accumulated debts, including those that had been contracted in her name. It seemed too good to be true, and Ana, with her analytical mind, immediately realized that something didn't add up. In that instant, despite the pain, a spark ignited within her. Ana did not yet know how or when, but she was determined to understand what was really happening. She felt that something deeper and perhaps more dangerous was hidden behind that apparent generosity. The unexpected envelope not only brought the end of the marriage but also the beginning of a journey that would completely change her life, revealing strengths she never imagined she possessed. Ana was still holding the divorce documents when her cell phone vibrated on the kitchen counter, breaking that frightening silence. Michael's name lit up on the screen, and her heart raced. For a brief moment, Ana believed that perhaps it was all a misunderstanding, a cruel joke, or some mistake. But, upon opening the message, any hope dissipated completely. In a few cold, distant words, he confirmed what the document said. He was leaving the house, had met someone else, and would never come back. Michael casually mentioned her name, Olivia Reed. Ana had heard that name before, a well-known investor in the financial market and an influential figure on social media. Someone with a lot of money, prestige, and influence, the exact opposite of the vulnerable moment Ana was living. The message ended with an impersonal and superficial notice. "You can rest assured, I've already taken care of everything. The debts will be mine. Good luck with your father." Ana felt a mix of indignation and despair invade her soul. How could someone be so cold and distant with someone with whom he had shared so many moments, dreams, and plans? She read the message several times, trying to find any trace of humanity or respect, but there was none. Michael had simply discarded his family, without hesitation, without remorse. The humiliation was deep, and Ana felt a pain that seemed to consume every part of her body. At that moment, she felt profoundly helpless. She thought of her children, Pedro and Luana, who still did not know what was happening. How was she going to tell them? How was she going to explain that their father had simply decided to vanish from the life they had built together? Ana leaned against the kitchen wall, taking deep breaths, trying to hold back the tears and muster the strength to face this new reality that was falling upon her shoulders. And then, while staring at the still open message on Michael's cold and calculated phone, Anna felt something new arise within her. It was as if a flame slowly ignited in her chest, a force coming from a deep place that she herself did not know existed. That night, Anna decided that she would no longer allow Michael to destroy her dignity or her family. That cold message was not the end, but the beginning of a silent battle that would change everyone's lives forever. In the following weeks, Anna plunged into an exhausting and desperate routine. Her father, Antonio, was rapidly deteriorating, and each hospital visit was a struggle against sadness and helplessness. Alzheimer's was slowly stealing his memory, his dignity, and his identity. Anna watched, devastated, as the strong and lucid man who had raised her with so much love transformed into someone almost unrecognizable. She felt guilty for not being there enough, torn between personal pain and the need to care for her children amid the separation. The financial situation also weighed heavily on her. The house had recently undergone an extensive renovation, and the debt installments were overdue, accumulating interest and fines that increased her worry. Although Michael had promised to assume the expenses, in practice, he was leaving everything pending, generating constant demands and the real threat of losing the home they had built together. Every day, Anna felt more overwhelmed, anguished by the sense that everything around her was crumbling. As if all these challenges were not enough, Anna received another worrisome piece of news after her annual exam. There was something suspicious in her mammogram. The doctor recommended further tests to rule out or confirm the presence of a tumor. That hit her like a bomb. The possibility of being seriously ill, precisely at that moment, seemed like an immeasurable cruelty of fate. Anna felt completely alone and helpless, with no one to share this crushing burden. While trying to balance so many concerns, her children began to notice that something was wrong. Pedro, at 10 years old, became increasingly introspective and quiet, while Luana, only 7, seemed alarmingly attentive to her mother's emotional state, frequently asking why Daddy wasn't coming home. Anna tried to protect the children, but she constantly felt guilty for not being able to hide her pain. At night, alone in her empty room, she would cry silently, begging for strength to endure it all. During that dark period, Anna's prevailing feeling was fear. Fear of losing her father, fear of losing her health, fear of not being able to protect her children, and fear of completely failing in the face of financial challenges. Amid that growing anguish, however, Anna did not realize that even in the silence and solitude of those difficult nights, something strong and resilient was growing within her, preparing her to face a future that, although she could not imagine, was already taking shape. One night after putting the children to sleep, Anna sat down, exhausted, at the kitchen table. It was late, the silence was profound, and the weight of her worries seemed heavier than ever. At that moment, her gaze fell upon the old notebook she used for work, covered with papers and overdue bills. An unexpected memory surfaced in her mind. Before getting married and dedicating herself exclusively to her family, she had been a brilliant accountant, praised for her exceptional ability to organize and solve complex financial problems. As she stared at the old computer, something stirred within her for the first time in weeks, like a small light emerging in the midst of deep darkness. Anna slowly opened the notebook, feeling a familiar energy return to her hands. Accessing old spreadsheets, archived documents, and financial reports she herself had prepared, she realized that her analytical ability was still there, intact, only dormant beneath the layers of pain, fear, and exhaustion. As she plunged back into the world of numbers and financial strategies, Anna felt a strange sense of control gradually returning. She spent hours reviewing contracts, loans, and the terms of the documents Michael had signed. Uncovering strange and inconsistent details, she discovered, with a mixture of surprise and indignation, that her name had been secretly removed from the house deed a few months earlier, leaving her vulnerable and completely dependent on his supposed generosity. In the early hours of the morning, Anna felt revolt seize her heart. Michael had calculated everything meticulously, acting behind her back, silently manipulating the circumstances to leave her defenseless. But now he had underestimated her capacity to react, forgetting who she really was. An intelligent, determined, and highly competent woman when it came to handling critical financial situations, the pain of betrayal slowly began to give way to an inner strength, firm and resolute, that Anna had not felt in a long time. That decisive night, as the first light of dawn timidly appeared through the kitchen window, Anna made a decision. She would no longer allow Michael to control her destiny or that of her children. She would no longer be passive in the face of injustice and manipulation. She had awakened something powerful inside herself, something that could no longer be silenced or ignored. Ana Ramirez was determined to show everyone, especially the man who had tried to discard her, what she was capable of. In the days that followed, Anna embarked on a careful, meticulous, and discreet investigation into Michael's recent financial actions. She knew she needed to act with caution, avoiding raising suspicions while gathering enough evidence to protect herself and, above all, her children. With her keen instincts and revived accounting skills, Anna soon uncovered something even more shocking. Michael had been accumulating secret debts that far exceeded what he had publicly assumed. Through discreet inquiries and old contacts in banks and financial offices, Anna discovered that Michael had been betting big on risky investments, many of which were directly influenced by Olivia Reed. The impeccable and secure image he had always shown her was a fragile facade, hiding an increasingly chaotic and vulnerable financial scenario. Anna then realized why he had so readily agreed to assume the joint debts. He was trying to mask his own problems and win the absolute trust of his new partner. With every discovery, Anna felt more indignant, but also more empowered in her determination to react. It was no longer just about protecting herself, but also her children, whose financial and emotional security now depended solely on her. Amid this emotional whirlwind, one thing became clear. Michael had acted with extreme arrogance, believing that she was too fragile, too emotional, to notice or react to his moves. That only strengthened Anna's determination to prove otherwise. One evening, while reviewing bank documents in the silent living room, Anna found irrefutable proof. Michael had forged her signature on some recent loans, including one that once again mortgaged the house, which now was only in his name. This was not only illegal, but deeply immoral and shocking, especially coming from someone she had completely trusted until recently. She felt her hands tremble, her heart race, but not from fear. It was anger and an intense desire for justice. Right there, as she stared at those proofs laid out on the table, Anna clearly understood her role in this story. She would not be a silent victim of Michael's cowardly actions. The betrayal and the pain had already cost her too much, for her and her children. Now, armed with the necessary evidence, Anna was ready to completely turn the tables, ensuring that the man who had tried to destroy her faced the real and profound consequences of his irresponsible acts. With all the information in hand, Anna knew she needed to act strategically and precisely. Succumbing to anger or impulse could compromise everything. She sat calmly and devised a plan. The first step would be to ensure that Michael could no longer continue manipulating the situation without her being one step ahead. To that end, she decided to consult a lawyer specialized in family law and financial crimes. She knew she needed a professional who not only understood the law, but was also accustomed to dealing with men like Michael. The next morning, after dropping the children off at school, Anna went to the office of Clara Mendez, a lawyer known for her relentless record in defending women in complicated divorces. Upon presenting the evidence she had gathered, she saw something shine in Clara's eyes: admiration for her client's intelligence and astuteness. "You have a solid case, Anna," the lawyer said, crossing her arms. "Michael not only betrayed you emotionally, but he also committed financial crimes. We can use that against him in several ways." Clara explained that they could file a lawsuit to reverse the house transfer and even seek compensation for the damages caused. Moreover, the forgery of her signature on financial documents was a serious crime that could lead Michael to face significant legal consequences. "The key now is not to alert him," said Clara. "He must not suspect that you already know everything. We need him to keep believing he's in control." Anna agreed, and together they devised a strategy to strike at the right moment. In the following days, Anna continued her routine as if nothing were amiss, showing no sign that she knew anything. She answered Michael's calls with neutrality, replied to his messages briefly and politely, as if she were simply processing the separation. Meanwhile, Clara and her team worked behind the scenes, preparing the necessary documents to initiate the legal process with precision. With each passing day, Anna felt stronger, more secure in herself. The pain still existed, but now it was accompanied by purpose. The night before the big move, Anna looked at herself in the mirror and hardly recognized the woman she saw. She was no longer the submissive wife Michael had left behind, nor the frightened woman who had found the divorce papers in the kitchen. She was someone reborn from the ashes of betrayal, a woman who knew exactly what needed to be done. The next day, she would not only confront Michael, but ensure that he faced everything he had tried to hide. The silent war had begun, and this time, Anna was ready. The following morning, with everything prepared, Anna followed exactly what Clara had instructed. She needed to act with a cool detachment, as if she were still emotionally fragile and uncertain about the next steps. That would ensure that Michael continued underestimating her, which was essential so he wouldn't anticipate his own moves. Her first act was to schedule a meeting with him, under the pretext of discussing the division of assets and an amicable agreement. Michael, believing that she was finally giving in, accepted promptly. The meeting took place in a discreet cafe, far from the places they used to frequent together. Michael arrived with his usual air of superiority, wearing an impeccable suit and sporting a condescending smile. "I'm glad you've reconsidered things," he said, seating himself at the table. Anna merely nodded, remaining serene. "I don't want any fights, Michael," she said calmly. "I just want a fair agreement for our children." He smiled confidently, not realizing that this conversation was merely a piece in the game Anna had set up. As Michael tried to steer the dialogue in his favor, Anna observed every detail, every word. She knew that he still believed he was in control. In the midst of the conversation, she casually mentioned that she would like to review some documents before signing any agreement. "I want to be sure that everything is within the law," she said, feigning concern. Michael smiled, touching his coffee cup. "Of course, Anna. You know I've always done everything with the best intentions for you all." Anna suppressed a laugh at the hypocrisy. At the exact moment Michael relaxed, believing he had the situation under control, Anna placed an envelope on the table containing copies of the financial frauds he had committed. His face transformed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by an expression of shock and nervousness. "What is this?" he asked, his voice more tense. Anna crossed her arms, keeping her gaze fixed on his. "This, Michael, is proof that you tried to deceive me, and that now you are completely in my hands." The change in his demeanor was instantaneous. He began to leaf through the documents, his eyes widening with every page. "You can't prove any of this," he attempted to argue, but his voice trembled slightly. Anna smiled serenely. "Actually, I can, and I've already begun the process with a lawyer. But for now, I'm willing to negotiate. If you don't want this to become a scandal, I suggest we reconsider the agreement." Michael swallowed hard. For the first time, he realized that he had lost. The game had turned, and Anna was now in command. Michael remained silent for a few seconds, trying to process the unexpected turn of events. He had always believed that Anna was fragile, someone he could manipulate and discard without resistance. But now, in the face of the indisputable evidence she had laid before him, he realized that he had made a fatal mistake. His face turned pale, and the confidence he had always flaunted began to crumble. Anna, on the other hand, remained impassive, observing him with calculated calm. "This doesn't have to get any worse, Michael," she said, crossing her arms. "You know that if this goes to court, your reputation will be ruined. Your new life with Olivia? Forget it. She won't want to take on this mess." The mention of Olivia's name made him clench his fists. He was used to being the strategist, but now, for the first time, he felt completely cornered. Anna saw the internal struggle in his eyes. He was trying to find a way out, but she had already closed all the doors. "And what do you want, Anna?" he finally asked, his voice lower, more hesitant. It was exactly the moment she had been waiting for. "I want what is rightfully mine," she replied, sliding a copy of the revised agreement prepared by the lawyer across the table. "The house will be transferred back into my name, along with half of our joint assets. And more importantly, you will fully assume the debts you tried to shift onto me." Michael laughed incredulously. "That's ridiculous. I'm never going to sign that." Anna leaned forward, her tone remaining soft yet filled with unwavering certainty. "If you don't sign, I'll take all of this to court. With this evidence, not only will you lose your career and your reputation, but you could also face criminal charges." Michael took a deep breath, averting his gaze. For the first time in years, he no longer had the advantage. Anna had taken control, and he knew he had no choice but to yield. He picked up the documents and leafed through them with contained anger. His mind raced, searching for an alternative, but there was no way out. Anna had been meticulous. He swallowed hard and, with no other option, picked up the pen that lay on the table. With a look filled with resentment, he signed the agreement. When he finished, Anna calmly gathered the papers and put them away. "It's been a pleasure doing business with you, Michael," she said, before rising and leaving the cafe, leaving him alone with the weight of his own ruin. Anna left the cafe without looking back. The weight she had carried on her shoulders for months seemed finally to be lifting. She felt no regret, no guilt, only the certainty that she had done what was necessary. Her heart was still broken, her life still needed to be rebuilt, but at that moment, she knew she had regained something essential: her power. The first thing she did upon arriving at Clara's office was to hand over the signed documents. The lawyer smiled as she flipped through each page, confirming that everything was as expected. "He signed without questioning?" Clara asked, raising an eyebrow. Anna let out a short laugh. He tried to resist, but in the end, he knew he had no choice. The lawyer nodded. "Good. That means we can now proceed with the legal procedures without worry. In a few weeks, the house will officially be yours again." Anna breathed deeply upon hearing those words. For months, she had felt like a stranger in her own life, displaced and powerless. Now, that place which had been forcibly taken from her would return to her hands. More than just a house, it was a symbol of everything she had lost, and now was regaining. But there was still more to be done. Michael might have signed the papers, but the battle was not yet completely won. In the following days, Anna began to reorganize her life with renewed energy. She resumed her career, reconnecting with old contacts to secure a stable job, something that no longer depended on Michael or anyone else. She needed to ensure that her financial independence was permanent. She also spent more time with her children, helping them through that difficult phase without letting them feel the whirlwind of emotions she herself experienced. Little by little, Anna's life began to take a new direction. Every small step she took, every achievement, was a reminder that she was not the woman Michael had believed could be discarded without consequences. She had not only survived, she was flourishing. The next step would be to make sure that Michael felt the true weight of his choices. And for that, Anna still had one last ace up her sleeve. Michael thought that the worst was over. He had signed the agreement, lost the house, and assumed the debts, but he still believed he could recover. To him, Anna had only scored a small, temporary victory. However, he underestimated the depth of the strategy she had devised. What he did not know was that there was one more fundamental piece in play, a piece he never anticipated. A few days after the agreement was signed, Anna received a call from Clara. "We have one last card to play," said the lawyer, her voice carrying an almost amused tone. Anna listened attentively as Clara explained that by investigating Michael's finances more deeply, they had discovered an irregularity that could put him in an even more delicate position. For years, he had committed tax fraud, embezzling money and hiding assets. And now, Anna had proof of it. She pondered what to do. She could simply move on with her life, satisfied with what she had already achieved. But when she remembered Michael's disdain, the way he had tried to erase her from his own house, she knew she had to go all the way. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. And more than that, it was a lesson so that he would never again underestimate someone like her. With the documents in hand, Anna made her decision. She sent a complete dossier of the fraud to the tax and financial authorities, ensuring that Michael would be investigated. On the same day, Clara filed an additional lawsuit, alleging bad faith in the division of assets and requesting a complete review of his finances. Now, Michael was not only in debt, but he was also about to face a serious investigation that could compromise his career and his future. When Michael received the official notification of the investigation, he panicked. He tried to contact Anna, sent messages, made calls, even showing up at her house trying to talk. But for him, Anna no longer existed. With the same coldness with which he had discarded her, she simply ignored him. To her, their story was over. But for Michael, the real nightmare was just beginning. The following days were pure chaos for Michael. His confidence crumbled as he realized the gravity of the situation. At first, he tried to downplay the problem, believing that his position and contacts could help him escape. But when government officials began investigating his finances and the bank froze part of his assets, he realized that Anna had not only won, she had destroyed him. The office where he worked was the first to feel the impact. Michael's reputation had always been his greatest weapon. But now, with the investigation quietly unfolding, his partners began questioning whether it was worthwhile to remain associated with someone whose credibility was in ruins. The news of the fraud leaked into the financial market, and his public image started to deteriorate. Clients began avoiding him, and his once promising career was sinking rapidly. Olivia, the woman for whom he had abandoned Anna, was the next to pull away. As soon as his financial problems began to worsen, she saw the risk of getting further involved and decided to distance herself. Michael tried to explain, swearing that he would fix everything, but Olivia didn't want to be associated with someone on the verge of losing everything. The relationship, which had begun with betrayal, ended in the same way, with abandonment. For the first time, Michael experienced the bitter sensation of being discarded. While he unsuccessfully tried to contain the damage, Anna went on with her life calmly. Her house was once again in her name, her finances were organized, and her new job gave her the security she needed. Her children were well, and she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she could look ahead without fear, without worrying about what Michael would do, because now he had no power over her. In the end, Michael could not escape the consequences of his actions. With investigations advancing and his debts accumulating, he was forced to sell his apartment and many of his assets to cover the legal costs. He lost everything he had once valued: status, money, and reputation. And while he sank into problems of his own making, Anna rebuilt her life with dignity. He had learned the hard way that sometimes the greatest revenge is not to destroy someone, but to let that person reap everything they sowed. With Michael out of the picture, Anna finally felt that she could breathe without fear. The life she had rebuilt was not just a restored version of what it once was. It was something entirely new, something she had shaped with her own hands. She didn't just want to recover what she lost. She wanted to become someone stronger, more independent, and happier. And for the first time in years, she had complete control over her own destiny. The first few months after the separation were a period of adjustment. Even having gained her freedom, Anna knew she needed to strengthen her new life so that she would never again depend on anyone. She invested time and effort in her career, seizing opportunities she would have never considered before. With her intelligence and analytical ability, she quickly earned respect in her new professional environment. In no time, she was not just another employee. She became a benchmark. But her transformation was not only professional. Anna also decided to reclaim parts of herself that she had left behind during the marriage. She resumed hobbies she enjoyed, started traveling again, reading, and reconnecting with friends who had been pushed aside by Michael over the years. Every small decision was an act of freedom, a reminder that she had not only survived, she was reborn. Her children were an essential part of this process. Anna wanted them to grow up knowing that their mother was strong, that she wouldn't be defeated, and that she fought for her happiness. Over time, they too began to notice the changes. The tension that once lingered in the air disappeared. Conversations at home became lighter, and the house once again became a place of peace. Anna knew that challenges would still come, but now she faced everything with a new outlook. Looking back, Anna no longer saw a traumatic past, but rather a necessary journey. Every pain, every blow, and every loss had been fundamental for her to arrive at where she was. The woman she was before Michael was no more, and that was a victory, because now, for the first time, she lived without chains, free. Years passed, and Anna built a life that, in her darkest moments, she had never imagined possible. Her name had become synonymous with success in her field, and her reputation was respected by everyone who crossed her path. The past was left behind, a distant echo that no longer weighed on her. But fate, as always, loves to play with those who believe they have everything under control. On an ordinary afternoon, while having coffee at a restaurant near work, Anna heard a familiar voice in the background. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence, but when she looked up, her heart skipped a beat for a brief moment. Michael was there, sitting a few tables ahead, alone. He was unrecognizable. The confident and imposing man she once knew now looked haggard, with deep, dark circles and a lost expression. His suit, once impeccable, looked worn, and his posture carried a weight he had never known before. For a moment, Anna wondered if she should ignore him and go on her way. But something inside her said that this moment needed to happen. Without hesitation, she got up and walked over to his table. Michael looked up, surprised to see her there. His eyes filled with shame, a feeling he had never shown before. Anna, He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. She wasn't there to listen to apologies. She didn't need them. Time had already settled everything. I hope you are well, Michael, she said calmly. There was truth in her words. She really hoped he had learned something. Michael lowered his head, visibly uncomfortable. I ruined everything, he murmured. For the first time, he seemed to truly admit to himself what he had done. Anna smiled faintly but said nothing more. Her look said everything that needed to be said. She turned and left the restaurant without looking back. At that moment, she was absolutely certain that her journey of overcoming had been completed. Michael was part of the past, and she, finally, was free. As she left the restaurant, Anna felt a mix of emotions. It wasn't anger, nor resentment. It was something deeper, as if a page had been turned within her. For years, she had imagined that if she ever encountered Michael again, she would feel the urge to confront him, to ask questions, to demand explanations. But at that moment, she realized she already had all the answers she needed. She walked through the city streets reflecting on how everything had changed since he had tried to erase her from his own life. Fate had taken care of settling the score, but more than that, it was her own strength and determination that had brought her here. The past no longer defined her. She was far more than the woman who was betrayed and deceived. She was someone who rebuilt herself from scratch and created a life that would have never been possible if she had stayed by his side. Michael, on the other hand, seemed trapped in his own decline. His choices had led him to that state. He had bet everything on his arrogance, on his belief that he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. But life always exacts its toll. Anna didn't feel pity for him, only a strange compassion. She knew that at some point he would realize that what he lost was much more than money or status. That night, Anna arrived home and observed her reflection in the mirror. For the first time, she saw not just a woman who had survived, but a woman who had triumphed. Everything she had accomplished was the result of her resilience, her intelligence, and her courage to face what seemed impossible. If there was one thing her past had taught her, it was that every choice matters. And so Anna moved forward, without bitterness, without remorse, without any sense of debt to the past. Her life was no longer defined by what had happened to her, but by what she chose to do afterward. And her choice would always be the same: to move forward without looking back. In the months following the unexpected encounter with Michael, Anna felt lighter than ever. It was as if, by seeing him in that condition, she had finally severed the last invisible tie that still connected her to the past. There were no more repressed pains, no ghosts haunting her thoughts. For the first time, She felt that her life was truly her own. She began to allow herself new experiences without fear. Previously, she carried with her a constant sense of vigilance, as if she had to prove something to someone. Now, that need had vanished. She traveled alone to places she had always wanted to visit, without the shadow of a controlling husband. She learned to enjoy her own company, and discovered a taste for things she had never had time to explore before. Her emotional independence also reflected in her relationships. For the first time, Anna realized that she didn't need a relationship to feel complete. Not that she had closed the door to love, but now she knew that if she ever fell in love again, it would be by choice, not out of necessity. Her greatest relationship at that moment was with herself. With her children growing up, she began teaching them something she had learned the hard way: the importance of not relying on anyone's validation. She wanted them to grow up knowing that they could build their own path without allowing anyone to diminish or control their lives. She knew that the example she set for them was far more valuable than any advice. Looking back, Anna no longer saw a traumatic past, but rather a necessary journey. Every pain, every blow, every loss had been essential for her to reach where she was. The woman who existed before Michael was no more, and that was a victory, because now, for the first time, she lived without chains. Free. Years passed, and Anna built a life that, in her darkest moments, she had never imagined possible. Her name had become synonymous with success in her field, and her reputation was respected by everyone who crossed her path. The past had been left behind, a distant echo that no longer weighed on her. But fate, as always, likes to play with those who believe they have everything under control. One ordinary morning, upon opening her emails, Anna received an unexpected message. It was from an old mutual friend who, unaware of the impact of the information, mentioned that Michael had hit rock bottom. His debts consumed him. His career never fully recovered, and now he was facing a judicial process that could lead to his definitive ruin. Anna could have simply ignored that message. After all, he had reaped what he had sown. But, for some reason she couldn't quite understand, she felt an odd impulse to go beyond mere curiosity. A part of her wanted to see with her own eyes just how far fate had brought him. So, discreetly, she sought more information. What she discovered surprised her more than she expected. Michael was living in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of the city, far from the luxury he once flaunted. The few contacts he still had reported that he lived in a cycle of lamentation, blaming everyone for his downfall except himself. And, even more surprisingly, it seemed that he had tried to contact Anna months earlier, but had given up at the last moment. She took a deep breath, processing all that information. She didn't feel joy at his misery, but there was also no sadness, only a cool detachment. Fate had been relentless with Michael, just as he had been with her. Now the only difference was that Anna had moved on, and he remained trapped in his own snare. What Anna did not expect was that a few days after that discovery, Michael himself would reach out to her. The phone rang on an ordinary night, and when she answered, a hesitant voice sounded on the other end. "Anna, it's me." For a second she thought about hanging up, but for some reason she remained silent, allowing him to continue. Michael didn't beat around the bush. He knew he had no right to ask for anything, but he tried anyway. "I know I'm the last person in the world you want to talk to, but I have no one else. Things have gotten tough, and I just needed to hear your voice." Anna remained cold. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling out of desperation. "Michael, I hope you can find a way to get back on your feet," Anna said, her voice firm but without bitterness. "But I'm not the person who can help you with that." On the other end, he sighed heavily. "I understand," he replied, defeated. With no further words, Anna hung up, feeling lighter than ever. At that moment, she knew that she was finally free. Not just from him, but from any shadow that the past might still cast on her life. Michael could remain trapped in the web he had woven. But Anna? She had already flown away. And for the first time, she felt that she would never look back. After Michael's call, Anna felt that a cycle had been definitively closed. However, life has a curious way of testing our certainty about the past. A few months later, while walking at a corporate event, a conversation between two businessmen reached her ears, even though she hadn't sought it out. Michael was bankrupt. The judicial process he was facing had been a fatal blow. His accounts were frozen. He had lost the last property he owned, and it seemed he was now crashing at the home of an old colleague who, out of pity, had extended a hand to him. The man who once laughed as he tore her from her own home now didn't even have a roof to call his own. As much as justice had been served, Anna felt no pleasure in it. There was no vengeance, only consequences. Fate had merely returned to Michael everything he had tried to take from her. However, unlike him, she had had the courage to rebuild herself, and now she saw, with clarity, that that chapter no longer had anything to offer her. That night, Anna looked out at the city lights from the window of her apartment. Her heart was calm, unburdened, without anguish. She needed no further confirmation about what had happened. She needed to know nothing more about Michael. Her time for seeking answers and healing old wounds had come to an end. For the last time, she allowed the memory of her past to pass through her mind. And then, without effort, she let it go. She was no longer the woman who had suffered. She wasn't the woman who was betrayed. She was the woman who had won. And that would be the only story that mattered from then on. With the past finally buried, Anna allowed herself something that for many years had seemed an unattainable luxury: to live without fear. For the first time, every choice was hers, without the weight of justifications or insecurities. She no longer had to prove anything to anyone, not to Michael, not to the world, not even to herself. The feeling of freedom was almost intoxicating. Without looking back, she began exploring new horizons. She changed the way she worked, expanded her projects, and accepted challenges that before she had deemed too risky. Every small decision was proof that the control of her life was in her own hands. Those around her also noticed the difference. Her children remarked that she seemed lighter. Her friends saw her smiling more. And even her colleagues said that her presence was stronger than ever. Anna had become exactly who she was meant to be. And now, without shadows or chains, she shone. She still believed in love, but she knew that if she ever allowed herself to love again, it would be in a different way. No longer molding herself to someone's expectations, but finding someone who respected her for who she was. Love, if it came, would be a compliment, not a necessity. And so Anna continued her life, finally free, unburdened by the past, unafraid of the future. For the first time, she had not only survived, she truly lived. And that was more than any revenge could ever provide. Years passed, and Anna realized that her story was not just about survival, but about transformation. What was once pain turned into learning, and what had seemed like injustice revealed itself as the necessary push for her to discover her true strength. Now, looking back, she understood that everything she had gone through had shaped the woman she was today. Her greatest pride was the impact her journey had on others. Her children grew up seeing their mother rebuild herself, becoming an example of resilience and determination. Her friends and colleagues found in her a source of inspiration, learning that no one should accept less than they deserve. Even women who barely knew her story identified with the way she rose and followed in her footsteps. At a charity event, she was invited to give a talk about overcoming adversity. For the first time, she told her story in public, from the moment she found Michael's documents to the day she realized she no longer carried the past with her. In the auditorium, the silence was absolute. Every word she spoke resonated with those listening, many of whom were facing their own challenges. When she finished, she was given a standing ovation. That night, upon arriving home, she sat on the balcony and gazed at the sky. She took a deep breath, feeling whole. It was no longer about revenge, pain, or loss. It was about growth, about understanding that sometimes life breaks us only to rebuild us stronger. Her thoughts were interrupted by a notification on her phone, a message from a woman who had attended the event. "Thank you for sharing your story. You gave me the strength to change my life." Anna smiled. In the end, that was the greatest victory. Her story wasn't just hers, it was a legacy. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs this message of hope. Subscribe for more inspiring stories of overcoming and courage. Join our community to be moved by real stories of strength and transformation.